Hello. Together with my colleague, we will deliver this lecture written by Lev Manovich. The lecture title is Make It New: Generative AI, Modernism, and Database Art. In the lecture, we will discuss important parallels between media and art creation using generative AI today, and a number of conceptually related artistic paradigms in the 20th century. Although modernist art and generative AI media appear to be opposites of each other, one was focused on making it new, the other is based on training data of already existing art, I see them as similar. While modernist artists explicitly opposed traditions, in reality, they achieved innovation by reinterpreting and incorporating older art forms from other cultures. Similarly, generative AI tools allow the creation of new works because they are trained on massive databases of existing art and media. Therefore, making new art and media with Gen AI fits into a long-standing tradition in modern art that involves creating new art from accumulations of existing artifacts. This tradition encompasses modernist collage and photomontage, postmodern bricolage, net art, and the pioneering media work of artists like Nam June Paik. Contemporary AI artists, such as Rafik Anadol and Lev Manovich, exemplify the practice of using AI models trained on specific datasets to produce novel artworks that engage in a dialogue with historical art while introducing new possibilities. The current generative AI tools, such as ChatGPT, Midjourney, and Stable Diffusion, have been trained on very large and diverse datasets consisting of trillions of individual texts, or billions of images, and their text descriptions. However, many creators working with generative AI chose to either fine-tune existing AI models on their own data or train models only on such data. It is also very interesting to limit the training data set to a more narrow area within the larger space of human cultural history, or to a specific set of artists from a specific historical period. One such project will be a starting point for my discussion. Unsupervised by Rafik Anadol Studio is an AI art project that exemplifies these possibilities. The project uses AI model trained on the image dataset of tens of thousands of artworks from the collection of the Museum of Modern Art, New York. MoMA collection, in my opinion, is one of the best representations of the most creative and experimental period in human visual history, the 100 years of modern art between 1870 and 1970. It captures modernist artists' feverish and relentless experiments to create new visual and communication languages and make it new.
On the surface, the logic of modernism appears to be diametrically opposed to the process of training generative AI systems. Modern artists wanted to depart from classical art and its defining characteristics such as visual symmetry, hierarchical compositions, and narrative content. In other words, their art was founded on a fundamental rejection of everything that had come before it, at least in theory, as expressed in their manifestos. Neural networks are trained in the opposite manner, by learning from historical culture and art created up to now. A neural network is analogous to a very conservative artist studying in the Meta Museum without walls that houses only historical art. But we all know that art theory and art practice are not the same thing. Modern artists did not completely reject the past and everything that came before. Instead, modern art, developed by reinterpreting and copying images and forms from much older art traditions, such as Japanese prints, Vincent van Gogh, African sculpture, Pablo Picasso, and Russian icons, Kazimir Malevich. Thus, the artists only rejected the dominant high art paradigms of the time, realism and salon art, but not the rest of human art history. In other words, modernism was deeply historicist. Rather than inventing everything from scratch, it innovated by adapting certain older aesthetics to contemporary art contexts. In the case of geometric abstract art created in 1910s, these artists used images that were already widely used in experimental psychology to study human visual sensation and perception. When it comes to generative AI, we should not be blinded by how these systems are trained. It is true that artificial neural networks are trained on already existing human art and culture artifacts. However, their newly generated outputs are not mechanical replicas or simulations of what has already been created. In my opinion, these are frequently genuinely new cultural artifacts with previously unseen content, aesthetics, or styles. In other words, I'd like to suggest that modernist art projects and generative AI media creation are more similar than it appears on the surface. Some AI artists such Anna Riddler, Sarah Mayohas, and Refik Anadol have utilized in their works neural nets trained on specific datasets. Many other artists, designers, architects, and technologists use networks released by other companies or research institutions that were already trained on very large datasets, e.g., Stable Diffusion, and then fine-tune them on their own data. For example, Russian artist Lev Peryolkov fine-tuned the Stable Diffusion Model 2.1 using 40 paintings by well-known nonconformist artists who worked in the USSR starting in the 1960s, Eric Bulatov, Ilya Kabakov, and others. Peryolkov's image series Artificial Experiments 1-10, 2023, created with this custom AI model, is an original artwork that captures the aesthetic and semantic worlds of these artists without repeating closely any of their existing works. Instead, their DNAs captured by the model enable production of new meanings and visual concepts.
All new cultural artifacts produced with generative AI share one key characteristic. What is this characteristic? Unlike traditional drawings, sculptures, and paintings, generative media artifacts are not created from scratch. They are also not the result of capturing some sensory phenomenon, unlike photography, film, video, or sound recordings. Instead, they are built from a large archive of other media artifacts. This generative AI mechanism links generative media to certain earlier art genres and media making processes. However, if an artist working with earlier media was selecting and assembling new work manually, thus controlling every detail, artists using Gen AI tools works through an intermediary, trained AI model. We can also consider specific modern artworks that are especially relevant, such as experimental collage film A Movie, Bruce Conner, 1958, or many Nam June Paik installations that feature edited fragments of TV shows. In fact, because of the scale of Paik's containing hundreds of monitors, he may be the key figure in the media archaeology of generative AI. Seeing projects like Unsupervised in the context of this media-making tradition and its historical variations will help us understand these and many other AI artworks as art objects engaged in dialogues with art from the past, rather than as purely technological novelties or works of entertainment. I see many relevant moments and periods when I scan the history of art, visual culture, and media for other prominent uses of this paradigm, making new cultural objects from collections of existing ones. They are relevant to the current generative media not only because many artists in the past at different moments in media history used this approach, but also because the motivation for its periodic reoccurrence seems to remain the same. A new accumulation and accessibility of masses of cultural artifacts led artists to create new forms of art driven by these accumulations. Let me describe a few of these examples drawn from art and media history. For example, digital artists created a number of works in the late 1990s and early 2000s in response to the rapidly expanding universe of the World Wide Web. Health Bunting's _ReadMe 1998, for example, is a web page containing the text of an article about the artist, with each word linked to an existing web domain corresponding to that word. Mark Napier's Shredder 1.0, also 1998, presents a dynamic montage of elements that comprise numerous websites, images, texts, HTML code, and links. Going earlier to 1980s, we also find artists reacting to the accumulation of historical art and culture artifacts in easily accessible media collections. This is a paradigm known as postmodernism. Postmodern artists and architects frequently used bricolage to create works that included quotations and references to historical art, rejecting modernism's self-proclaimed emphasis on novelty and breaking with the past. While there are many possible explanations for the emergence of the postmodern paradigm at that time, one of them is particularly relevant to our discussion. The accumulation of earlier art and media artifacts in structured and accessible collections such as slides libraries, film archives, art history textbooks with many photos of the artworks, and other formats where different historical periods, movements, and creators were positioned together, inspired artists to begin creating bricolages from such references as well as extensively quoting them. And what about modernism of the 1910s to 1920s? While modernists claimed they valued originality and innovation, one of the methods they employed to achieve this novelty was the incorporation of direct quotations from the rapidly expanding realm of contemporary visual media. In these decades, use of large headings and the inclusion of photos and maps made newspapers more visually impactful. New visually oriented magazines, such as Vogue and Times, were launched in 1913 and 1923, respectively. And of course, a new medium of cinema continued to develop. In response to this visual intensification of mass culture, in 1912, Georges Braque and Pablo Picasso began incorporating actual newspaper, poster, wallpaper, and fabric fragments into their paintings. A few years later, John Hartfield, George Grosz, Hannah Hook, Alexander Rodchenko, Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, and a handful of other artists began to develop photo collage, which became another method of creating new media artifacts from existing mass media images. Contemporary artworks that employ AI models trained on cultural databases, such as unsupervised, continue a long tradition of creating new art from accumulations of images and other media. Thus, these artworks create novel possibilities for art and its methodologies, specifically within the realm of what I previously described as database art. See my 1999 article, Database as a Symbolic Form. The introduction of new methods for reading cultural databases and creating new narratives from them is part of this expansion. Unsupervised neither creates collages from existing images, as did modernist artists of the 1920s, nor quotes them extensively, as did postmodern artists of the 1980s. Instead, Rafik Anadol's studio trained AI model to extract patterns from tens of thousands of MoMA's artworks. The model can generate new images that have the same patterns as training data, but don't look like any specific paintings. However, rather than simply displaying these images separately, the installation presents the viewers with the constantly changing animation. As we watch it, we travel through the space of these patterns, for example, latent space, exploring various regions of the universe of modern art as represented in MoMA collection.
Let me summarize what we have covered in this lecture. We discussed important parallels between media and art creation using generative AI today and a number of conceptually related artistic paradigms in the 20th century. Although generative AI and modernist art appear to be opposites of each other, one was focused on making it new, the other is based on training data of already existing art. In reality, they are similar. While modernist artists explicitly opposed traditions, in reality, they achieved innovation by reinterpreting and incorporating older art forms from other cultures. Similarly, generative AI tools allow the creation of new works because they are trained on massive databases of existing art and media. Therefore, making new art and media with Gen AI fits into a long-standing tradition in modern art that involves creating new art from accumulations of existing artifacts. This tradition encompasses modernist collage and photomontage, postmodern bricolage, net art, and the pioneering media work of artists like Nam June-paik.
Thank you for your attention. The content of this lecture is derived from a draft chapter authored by Lev Manovich for the book titled Artificial Aesthetics, Generative AI Art and Visual Media. The book is written jointly by Manovich and Emanuele Ariely, with each author contributing separate chapters. This and all other chapters can be downloaded from the URL on this slide. See you soon again.